In the previous video, we discussed a pure Node.js implementation of the create, read, update, delete operations. In this video, we re-implement this CRUD application with the popular web application framework Express.js. This video is neither a Node.js tutorial nor is it an Express.js tutorial. I'm just giving you a high-level overview of the source code. You find the source code on GitHub in the repo of this playlist. Now let's get started. With Express.js, we are still responsible for parsing the ID string ourselves and to make sure that this ID appears in our fake database. So these lines are identical. Now let's see how we process the same GET request in Express.js. In Express, we create a so-called application. Express is a web application framework. So we create an application, and whenever our application receives a GET request to the /cars endpoint, Express.js will execute this piece of code that we pass as argument. In Express, the response object has a send method as well. This comes from Express.js. Over here in Node.js, the response object does not have a send method. It only has it in Express.js. If we call the send method with a JavaScript object, then several things happen automatically. Express.js is smart enough to write out the response header content type application.json. It is also smart enough to turn the JavaScript object into a string in JSON format, so we don't have to do that either. It happens automatically. And usually we don't have to call the end explicitly. In Node.js we have to call the end method. Over here in Express.js it almost always happens automatically, and we usually don't have to call the end method. This GET request was processing the /cars endpoint. If a car with a specific ID is requested, then we first grab the ID, which we parsed here, and we made sure that this ID is a valid ID. Once we have the ID, we grab the car from our fake database and send it back to the client. So that was the GET request. Now let's see how we can respond to POST requests in Express.js. Whenever our Express.js application receives a POST request to the /cars endpoint, Express.js will execute our code, this function. One notable difference compared to the Node.js implementation is that the request object in Express.js has a body attribute. Over here in Node.js we don't have a body attribute. We have to read in the data with the JSON function, which comes from Node.js. And it is our task to read in the data. In Express.js, the request object has a body attribute if we enable it. So it is our responsibility to enable it in Express.js. How do we do it? Typically, most of the time, we enable it on the top of the source file. We must register the express.json middleware. And then Express.js will automatically read in the request payload. It will turn it into a JavaScript object, and we get this JavaScript object as the request body attribute. The next two lines, getting the first unused ID, are identical. There is no difference there. And then we would like to send back the status code 201 created with the location header. I could grab these two lines, copy it over here, and it would work in Express.js just as well. However, in Express.js we do things a bit differently. We set the status code with the status method of the response object, which only exists in Express.js. Response.status would be undefined here in Node.js. In Express.js, it's a method coming from the framework Express.js. Then we set the header by calling the location method of the response object, which only exists in Express.js, but not in Node.js. And then we pass as argument the path to the newly created car. It is an exception. We call the end method explicitly here in Express.js. We usually don't have to do this. It is an exception to this rule of thumb. The next CRUD operation is update. How do we implement update in Express.js? Whenever our Express.js application receives a patch request to the /cars/id endpoint, Express.js will execute this function. This is similar to the Node.js implementation. Again, the difference is that here in Express.js, we get the data as the body attribute. Over here in Node.js, we don't. We receive the identifier from the request.params attribute, which we created up here when we checked the validity of the ID as well. So we get the ID under the params attribute. The next line, these two are identical, there is no difference there. Response.status code would work in Express.js too, but in Express.js, the recommended way is to call the sendStatus method of the response object with the status code. This also finishes the response. Here in Node.js, we have to call response.end ourselves. Otherwise, the two implementations are quite similar. And finally, how do we delete a car from our fake database? The only notable difference is that we get the ID from the params attribute just as before at the patch request, and that we send the 204 status code back with the sendStatus method. And that's it. That's how we implement the CRUD operations with the popular web application framework Express.js. Did this video help? Then please give it a thumbs up, please like it. If you have any questions or problems, please leave a comment right below and I will do my best to get back to you. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one.